Welcome back to Beholder to No One, a D&D podcast. Today we're here with Afar Podcast, from Afar Podcast. Sorry, you guys have me all fucked up now.
we also have a weird name, so don't worry.
Yeah.
From Afar Podcast, who has had me cracking up laughing for the last 20 minutes already. We haven't even started fucking recording.
Glad to hear it.
Yay.
That's the fuel that gets these bunzos in apparently a very unclean ovenzo. So
these bunzos are anything but dunzo.
That is what makes my bunzos runzo.
Oh no.
So, we're here to talk about role-playing in character specifically, but we're more than likely going to get off topic, especially because all of us happen to do that very frequently. So
Absolutely.
I'm sorry, Greg, ahead of time for editing this episode. Yes. So speaking of possibly terrible acting, possibly good acting, role-playing in character.
Oh, yeah.
Great segue.
Look at that segue.
My God.
Masterfully done.
So this has actually come up today on with a player that with a player that's newer. And they're a little nervous about role-playing because they've never done that part before. They've played video games, and in video games, you do not have to role-play.
Mm-hmm.
But I was going to just talk about how, as a player, you can add to the story by being a role player, or just adding to the scenario. Because there are some times where it gets kind of old when someone's like, okay, what do you do? Nah, I rolled a 17. I hit. Okay, cool. I stab it. And that's it. And then the DM has to feed off of that and try to amplify it, but it shouldn't always fall on the DM.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At From Afar Podcast, we kind of have become known a little bit for this collaborative sort of way that we approach it, where David, as the DM, is gracious enough to allow us, the players, to breathe in our own ideas and have them come to life.
Mm-hmm.
It's a cool, there's no pride from any of us. All of us are so okay with each of us, putting our hands in our own stories too for our characters and ideas and everything like that. Cause we just know it makes the stew better.
It's the stew. It needs more of that Christian flavor.
Yeah. Too many chefs ruins the stew, but 4 chefs, perfect amount.
I also think that, D&D, right? It's a group storytelling narrative event. So I think the dynamic of the group changes the way the story is played out. So I think if you have some people that really require the main leader to pave the way, and then people build off of that, that could be one group's dynamic. Our dynamic is we just say whatever the hell we want at this whenever we want, which David is such an awesome DM, can take that and not.
It takes a great improviser to be able to withstand everything we do.
Exactly. He doesn't get derailed by it, because I'm sure DMing's kind of an art style, and certain art styles are more organized or more in control than not. And David totally feels comfortable giving us control over that, which is incredible. And as Christian mentioned, an improv style too, because we really try to make our co-actors, us, the other 3
Supporting
boys,
actors.
Yeah, we make them look good. We're not trying to make ourselves look good. We're trying to make the story look good and everyone else look good too. Because if you do that, then everyone's looking good, because everyone's working on everyone else, and it's not this weird greedy grab for the limelight. So we try to do that. I'm sure we go against that sometimes, but that's how we.
It's never flawless, but if it's the aim, then it typically goes well.
Mm-hmm.
But specifically to what you were saying, you're the player in question, played a lot of video games and things. To me, that's kind of the beauty of D&D, is that in a video game, you hit the attack button and you attack, or you cast the spell and the spell happens. But in D&D, you get to do something that you can't in video games. You get to do it how you want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And you get to put your own spin on it, make it your own, because, there's so much that players can control, but ultimately, it's the DM's say. But you roll to hit, you are hitting now, and you get to say Andy does a really good job of always describing his character in our show, Arius, has very methodical attacks. He's not trying to waste energy or movement. It's very linear and to the basics sort of attacks. Whereas my character, Sieghart, is always doing big, reckless swings and things. And Christian's character is doing more kind of more on the fly attacks because he doesn't melee attack very often. And you get to make your own flavor of how your character is attacking, and it builds out that character more. It gives life to a certain part that might not have life.
That's a great point that I want to jump on, just because a lot of people are so afraid of role playing because they think like having to do a voice, having to step in and like act in front of people. And that's kind of like the same fear as like public speaking. It's like being vulnerable in a different way. But what you're describing is great, because for someone who might, you know, be a little bit more cautious about the role playing and want to dip their toe in a little bit more, like they can, there's other ways to role play. Like Goovy's saying, your description of how your character acts can be just as big of an indicator of like who they are and what they believe in. Like he was saying with Arius, with Anne's character, he has always described it like that, which makes for moments when he doesn't do that even more of like a big moment, and it shows character growth and development, but that's just in action alone.
I like when, for me, it's when you, since we can't see each other all the time, especially when you're playing online, you can't see each other's facial expressions and their body emotions. I like describing what my character is doing. Like she looks over at the person suspiciously and just kind of gives her a look for a second. And I'll tell the player, I'm like, you recognize the look. She wants to punch her really bad. And like, they'll know my character enough that they're like, no, Tari, don't you fucking dare. And she's like, but I kind of really want to.
Just let me do it. Just one time, please.
That's usually ends up what happens. But I like also that you can flavor your motion. So same character, I play a monk. Technically, unarmed strikes are supposed to just be your fist. But I will flavor it sometimes and just use my fist every time. But I'll be like, oh, I'll run up and kick them and sweep their legs out from under them and do stuff like that. It's all still a punch technically for role purposes. But it's way more fun to say you're like kicking and sweeping legs and shooting things and like throwing rocks.
Elbows, knees, all that fun stuff.
Nobody's just punching.
Everybody wants to be Legolas from Lord of the Rings. Sliding down.
Yeah, I mean, you got to be sometimes.
It makes the game basically.
But yeah, kind of what Christian was saying earlier, though, like role play, it is daunting, especially for people that, you know, haven't done theater or improv or anything like that,
or may not be in a group where they feel super comfortable like we are.
Yeah. I mean, we're very lucky that like our D&D group is people who have known each other. I mean, the Tilstra brothers their whole lives, but like I've known you guys for 10 years, and
be kind of a strange question or story if it was different.
Who's this man? Is this David?
Andy's known me his whole life, but I haven't. So
that is okay. There's the joke. I knew there was a joke somewhere in there, and I was like, "Where is it?"
But yeah, like, and I think a lot, like Christian was saying, like a lot of people think you have to do a voice and you have to get like fully into character and dress up, and you know, because D&D has a lot of stigmas that it hasn't fully shaken, even though it's gotten into the limelight in recent years.
Right.
But like, you don't. You know, I always just tell people like, okay, we're all writing a story together right now. And the part that you have the most control over is your character. So if you don't want to like dive in, do a voice or anything like that, that's fine. And if it's not fun for you, you don't have to.
Yeah, literally none of my characters ever have voices. I'll do a British accent every once in a blue moon, and it's really bad. Maybe a country Southern belle. That's all I got. Everybody else sounds exactly like this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like
what voices?
You know, I encourage people like, you know, have fun with it. Try something. And like, if you started doing a voice and you realize you hate the voice or you don't like it, you can always stop, because like nothing has to be hard set. There's no rule that's like, hey, if you did something that you hate, you have to keep doing it. Because we're all just sitting around playing imaginary together. So it's like, if I came into the first session with actually this did happen with Seacart. I came in with a voice that was like way more gruff and rough and everything. And then I was like, I hate this. So mid-session, I just like coughed and cleared my throat. And I was like, y'all just really let me talk like that this whole time? Nobody wanted to like comment on that. And I just changed his voice, because why not? Like,
are you guys Critical Role fans?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not at all caught up, but I love their work.
They're such good people.
This is I guess it's a minor spoiler, but not really. It doesn't really have any impertinent things to the story, so I won't give you reasons why. But Ford's character, his accent changes.
I
middle of
watched
season
enough.
2.
I watched enough to like see the beginnings of that, but I never saw it actually fully like change.
And
But
the reason
it's so
behind
cool.
it is great. I won't spoil it because I don't want to be that person. But it's
Yeah,
just, it's
that's
like,
one of those shows that's like always going to be there to go back to and listen to, which is nice.
right. So if they can do it on a show that popular, you can do it in your
Mhm.
personal game at home.
Yeah,
if they can do it on a
exactly.
show that makes money, we can do it on one that doesn't.
Right? What are the stakes here? What do you got to lose?
Goofy, you forget that we have made about $20 in this entire
That's
6
right.
Like, what do you mean we don't
And
make
everybody-
money? Come on, we're about to hit
But he's at everybody's
big.
home games.
Oh man,
And like that's I was just gonna
sorry.
say that's like my biggest urge, like to new players and people that are uncomfortable is like, and see what you don't, and then keep doing what you like, and don't do what you don't, because
Mhm.
there is no one telling you you have to. And if someone at your table is, I mean, we're all adults. Just be like,
Yeah.
I don't want.
I was just
to,
going to
so
tack on to
no.
that like at picking a voice, I've always found that picking a voice that I don't have to think too hard about is very helpful, because then it allows me to focus on what the character is saying and thinking. And I'm not sitting there like trying to do this super hard accent, and like my focus is just like so like, you know,
On the
it just
accent.
strained on the accent that I'm not even able to like think in the character's head.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
oftentimes that's why it's like using your own voice, or just like pitching your
Mhm.
voice up or down, or you
I
don't
like
have to do like a crazy accent or anything.
I like to do inflections. So like
Yeah.
I played a character that was a druid who liked to get high a lot. Even though I was the only
Yeah.
person at the table that like really hasn't tried anything, which was hilarious because they kept correcting me on everything. I'm like, no, this is how she's gonna say it. I don't care if it's wrong.
Hell yeah.
yeah, it's
But
my
she would-
character.
Yeah, she would just talk a little bit like, "Hey guys, like, yeah, that's cool. Like, that's sure." Like, it's the same voice. It's just I changed the inflection a little bit,
Mhm.
Yeah, it can be helpful to differentiate.
and then like my monk character just is a little bit more angry.
Well, that's something I've always thought is kind of interesting about whenever people talk about role playing. Is usually the first thing they talk about is like doing a voice, which for me, for my style of like getting into character and getting into the role play of it, like that is one of the first things I do, is just try to make a voice that I feel like fits the character. But like a voice isn't a character, and like an accent is a character. So like,
Ooh.
if you're having trouble role playing, what you guys are saying, like you don't have to do an accent. You just think like, oh, what does this character want? What is this character afraid of? What makes this character tick? Like that's what actually makes a character, not just this a family voice right here. Like
That's a fantastic point, Dave.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Was that- I don't-
Totally agree with that.
One that we've talked about a lot too, like the difference between how much should you develop your character and how much should you just let them develop as you play as well.
Oh,
That's-
absolutely.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I feel like there's a nice balance to strike up between the two.
Well, that
Mhm.
goes back to something like what we are talking about a little earlier, is like role playing like in a group setting where there is one person presenting story options and then other people filling in those options. That to me is where the role play happens, of like a DM being like, cool, this is where I think I want the story to go. Like we're at this castle trying to save this princess. That is where I think the session is going to go. But like once the other people get involved and start creating alongside of you, that might not be where it goes. And those decisions of like, cool, we're not going to go in through the front door, we're not going to go save this princess, we're going to go find this other thing, like that's where the character development and role play
Yeah.
really comes to life. Because it's a strange thing, like making characters and sending them on these quests and having them do these things where like we're all just sitting around a table or sitting behind a computer screen. But like I think it was you, Gooby, you said like there's a thing when like when what was it like when when people like look at your brain?
Yeah, your brain lights up the same way when recalling a D&D memory as it does a memory that you actually lived through, versus like if you read a book and recounted that story.
Yeah, and you'll notice too when you hear people talking about it, it's like, oh, do you remember when we did this? It's not like, do you remember when my character did this?
Mhm. And it's
That's
just
for
like
damn sure.
it's those moments that like I think really are what set TTRPGs apart from any other sort of group activity, because there's this when you're doing it, you're already role playing. Like when you're forced with making a decision of like, oh, should we go left, should we go right? You already are thinking in that mindset of like, well, I'm not in this swamp. I don't know what I would do, but
What are you doing in my swamp?
yeah, this ogre that's in my swamp. That's a different thought process. So I think people personally, I think people put not too much stock in role playing, because to me it's the most fun part of TTRPGs. But I think they put too much. They criticize themselves too much for not quote unquote doing it right, when there really is no right way to do it. Like
that's a good point. No matter what choice you make, that is a role-playing choice. Because
exactly.
whether you're like thinking hard about the motivations behind your character or not, like you can look back then on the choices that you've made in character and start to feel out who that character is from that.
Well, that's another thing that I think is really interesting, because like so many times, well, not so many times, almost every time we start, it's like we're these level 1 characters that level whatever characters that like we've never played before, but we put so much pressure on ourselves of like, what would my character do? What would my character do? What would my character do? And it's like, there's nothing wrong with that, but like we don't know yet. Like,
yeah, I didn't feel comfortable like thinking in Kippa's head until like a year, maybe.
That's why I like session zeros, because then you can intertwine your character backstory and you kind of get to understand like how you interact with the other players at the table.
Yeah.
Because if you can get your character to if you can understand everybody else's kind of motivations too and how you know them, it's a little less jarring when you first sit down at the table.
Yeah.
For example, you might have a story where, and you make it up on the spot in the session zero, you're like, I met you because we had an arm wrestling contest and you completely destroyed me, and it's like a little halfling versus a Goliath, and like you destroyed me, this halfling just destroyed me at this wrestling, and I have this mad respect for you now because I think you are the strongest person, even though I was probably just a little bit too drunk. And now you have a character connection where every time this halfling has to go do something, like, you got this, you're so good, you're so great, and like
those are the best moments. That's like we just did a crossover with Discount Dungeons and Know Your Role, and one of the things that we did before, because it was in the story, they're all 17th level, like high respected, high reputation members of this guild, and we had them go on a bunch of unrecorded missions before we recorded, just to give them that exact moment of like, oh, Holden, remember that time that you walked 1,000,000 miles? Like, they're like giving
literally that became one of the main points of the actual story because of that session zero time.
And it just like I love what you said there, Nikki, because it giving your actors and your friends and your party members those moments to draw from, like that's where like it might sound kind of silly and kind of like meaningless, but like having those little connections are really where character development and like, role playing happens. Like there's stuff that like in From Afar podcast, we recorded a 6-hour session that a session zero that we're never going to show anybody.
It's never going to see the light of day. But
like, well, maybe we'll see. But it just because of that, we got out all like the initial awkwardness, and like we were able to build a couple little moments that like I really feel like set Kippa, Seacard, and Arius on the immediate path of like friendship and camaraderie, other than just like, well, hey, hobgoblin over there, let's adventure together. Like because we like we built that into like the structure of our process. It took out all the awkwardness in the beginning.
Yeah, and like the disjointedness of being like, okay, we're all gonna go on a quest together now, even though we don't, like, why would we? Instead, we start in prison together. So.
Well, like I was gonna say, maybe a good beginner DM tip too is like come up with a reason why they would all know each other beforehand, and don't like leave that open, because that just helps solidify their bond, their ability to role play together, and like smoothly transition into this sort of like new imagination.
I would also say for a first time DM, if it's your very first time, talk with your party about that and try to get them to all be in agreement for why they're in a group together.
That's actually
You can get some fun collaboration there too, of like why they know each other, what their bonds are already, and then you have it.
That's one of my few pervasive rules, is that it's not my choice why you guys are together, and like you can play an edgy character if you want, but it's up to you to decide that you want to be part of the party, not like that's your character's choice.
I just don't like when there's that one person where you're just like, why are you even here? Like, dude, you tried to murder us twice. You tried to rob us. Seriously, like, why are we still allowing this guy in this party?
Yeah, and like,
Yeah.
that's why I like to stipulate it at the start of any of my tables and any of my sessions or any of my campaigns, is like, you can be the Sasuke, edgy, loner, rogue guy all you want, but you need to also find a good reason that you're working with this party and not stealing from them and killing them, because that's boring and lame.
Yeah. It also is hard. Like, it's really difficult to steal from party members of adventurers who are at the same level as you. I've tried many, many times. It doesn't really work that well.
I remember there was one game. This is when I was playing 3.5. I don't remember much about the campaign, but I made this evil character whose sole purpose for me was to make my boyfriend of the time's character break all his vows, because he stupidly took like 82 vows or some bullshit.
Oh god.
Like, literally like every vow he could possibly take, he took it.
Wow.
So I just kept trying to make him break those.
That's amazing.
And I was doing evil things, and one time this character was crying and I killed her.
Oh,
And then everybody
Wait a
in the
minute.
party except one, it wasn't a character, it was NPC.
oh,
Everybody, one character saw me and were like, oh my god, we have to kill her. And then I turned invisible and that one evil person saw me and she's like, I like you. I'm going to keep you around. So she would do whatever she could to keep me in the party, even though I was invisible and nobody else knew I was there.
that's amazing.
Wowzers. There's a lot to unpack there, Nikki.
There was. It was great.
So
That's
Oh man.
You know, they say that oftentimes our characters are reflections of ourselves.
All my characters are chaotic as fuck.
I guess we learned that if you're crying, don't be around Nikki.
yeah.
Hey, stop crying.
To be fair, they were trying to get the quest out of her and she just wouldn't say it. She just kept crying and she like, just tell her the quest got fine, I'll just take care of this, and shot her in the face.
Oh no.
Ever gonna do this?
God.
You get a little flash on your heads up display. Quest is no longer available.
The party will remember this.
What was funny is
man.
I slipped the I was playing an assassin in 3.5 and I slipped the note saying I wanted to assassinate the crying person before the DM could do anything, and then another player is like, I want to bless her. Had his hand on her head to bless her. I'm like, hey DM, how long does that take? He's like, 24 seconds. I'm like, cool. 18 seconds through the blessing.
Oh,
An
let
arrow
him get
appears between
started
your
on it,
fingers.
too. Like,
Oh no.
That's terrible.
It was fantastic.
I want to go back to like what David said. He mentioned like quirks aren't characters, and I think that's like really insightful, because when I've done this so many times, I made a character, I'm like, oh, they're gonna have all these like cool characteristics, and then I get to the first session and I'm like, I don't know who this person is. Actually, I just threw together an amalgamation of weird quirks and like character voices or strange imageries that I thought would make a funny character, and then it doesn't work. Because I'm talking about role playing. I think quirks and characteristics are just outcomes of character choices that have happened like before. So even like accents or like scars or hatred for certain things or love for certain things, I mean, those are all outcomes from a choice made. Even like an accent, you're from a certain area of the world. Like, why were they there? Why'd they come from there? So I love, David, what you said about, oh, like a character voice isn't a character, because like, why is the character voice there? Like what made them speak that way? What made them say that like in that way? So I've just been thinking about that honestly this whole time, because I thought that was really insightful and made me realize a lot of the way I create my own characters.
well, yeah. And I mean, it's like when Storm King's Thunder, a campaign me and the boys ran offline, like your evolution from Snacks to Pasta Boy, like you had that amalgamation of fun quirks, and then you were like, that's not actually like who my character is. And you just made a hard choice to be like, can we kind of retcon that and change it up a little bit? Like that's an alter ego, or that's like a past me. And like, this is who I am now, which gave you more freedom to like actually explore your character.
I will say, once you made that hard choice, Snacks was kind of kind of an anomaly. Like, what is snacks? But then
Right.
snacks turned into pasta, which is pretty funny, and in my opinion, pasta became literally one of the most like beloved characters I've ever had the joy of coming across. Like, so I think that's a good point, Gooey. Like, once you make that, like, it's a good place to start.
Yeah.
And like, there's nothing wrong with having quirks and funny voices and stuff. But like, if you really do want to have a sustainable, memorable, or enjoyable character, like, it's more than just the quirks. You got to find those real life moments.
Like we were saying earlier, you can work backwards.
Mhm.
And like, if you have things like quirks or like little personality traits that you've wanted to explore or try out or you think might be fun, like you can then look at that and just ask some questions about it. Like, why do they do this? What made them develop this personality trait? And then before you know it, you feel like you actually are starting to understand the person.
Mm-hmm.
I like when you can figure out why you have those flaws in the personality traits and things like that. Like, why do you like to party so much? Like, if you pick the one where like you want to drink all the time and you always like to drink and have and do whatever is fun, why? Like, did you grow up in a very stuck-up household that was super strict and you never got to have experience this as a child, and now you're like, I'm just gonna go big or go home?
Yeah, or are you escaping something?
Exactly.
Yeah.
What type? This could go 1,000 directions.
And that's, I think, why characters become interesting to people. They're not interesting because they drink a lot. I mean, they're interesting because of the trauma or the expression that makes them behave in that way. And then, like, those are just the surface level qualities that are reminiscent or just indicative of like deeper set things. I mean, trauma, I can't think of a positive word other than trauma or like
experiences.
Experiences, character foundations. So I just think it's just such a good thing you said, Dave, and I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Well, I mean, that kind of goes to just something also. Sorry, I keep just kind of steamrolling this conversation.
Yeah, you jerk. No, you
gosh,
Dave.
David.
God, David.
Roll oh my gosh. What? So I feel like a lot of times people will be afraid to like lean into a stereotype or lean into like a trope, kind of like, oh, I'm a drunk dwarven person who's always drinking and always drunk, whatever. Like, I feel like what you were just saying, Andy, like, if you leave the stereotypes at like the surface level of like, oh, like, yeah, I just get drunk all the time, whatever, like, that's boring. But if what you were just saying of like finding the deeper meanings and getting to those experiences of why a character is acting a certain way, it transitions from a stereotype into like an actual character. So I think it's okay to start with that, like you were saying, Christian, like start with these things and then work backwards and like then really dive into why this character is the way they are and then why they're responding certain ways.
And that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with like coming up with too much backstory or anything like that. Because like I mentioned earlier, we've talked about that where you can really like flesh out an entire person's whole life and then they're really only a level 1 character. So like we were saying, the balance earlier, it's like you got to leave some of that room to grow. And sometimes what that looks like is playing a little bit as the character. And I guess one of the terms is front story, where you're kind of learning who they are by playing them and then actively just making decisions that feel right and then looking back on them. So it's like you like this working backwards mentality. It can happen from natural improvisation and role play in the moment and like making choices of like, oh yeah, like I always check like my purse when we're going through crowded streets because I'm paranoid. And then, oh, okay, but then why are you paranoid? Oh, it's happened before. And then suddenly, oh yeah, now I have that to add to my backstory. Like I was robbed once or something and it was a traumatic experience. And then you have something new to add to that it was just another life experience.
I also like being able to give the DM a backstory that's fleshed out enough that you have enough to go off of, but there's still enough black, like little holes in the story.
I love that you said that, because that's one of my like biggest recommendations, especially to new players, is like, you can see a lot of times people will make this like very long backstory where they were, they rose to the top ranks of their like local guard and like they killed a dragon and now we're level 1 and starting. And it's like, you are like, if you flesh out your backstory so much that like you've already done the adventures, why would you go on one? But you leave it, like you flesh it out enough that there's things to pull from, but you leave it blank enough that you have room to grow and make a character that's going on this journey and is having these experiences that will help define them.
Well, in the blank spots in your backstory, those are like gifts to you, to yourself,
Yes.
like later on.
Mhm.
Because how, like, yeah, there's something to be said about control and, you know, stuff about that with your character. But for the most part, I'm always so excited when David drops something having to do with my backstory that I didn't expect, or that he went ahead and took the liberty of changing or like innovating something on his own. Because I didn't expect it. And that's such a cool gift to me, because then he's also now injected his own voice into my narrative that I wrote for my character, and it's made it better.
It's like, yeah, it's such a good feeling because it's like, oh, there's a little surprise.
That's, I think, one of the coolest parts about like role playing and backstory and like group storytelling is you in the moment, and the decisions we make at the table, they become kind of canon. So like I was saying earlier, it's not one person's story. It's not just the DM's voice. It's not just the character's voice. It's this really cool give and take of like, oh, cool. Like you presented this, you were from this part of the world when your family were kings and queens, whatever. That's awesome. Like, but now like because of the choices and decisions we made at the table, like they maybe have fallen from that power, and now you have to deal with that. And like, I don't know. I think it's this really like, working group storytelling and TTRPGs are so cool because you can have those living moments basically. Of like, I'm trying to think of an example from here's a good one. So there's a moment in the podcast and from Afar Podcast.
Oh, which one was that, Dave?
From Afar Podcast. Have you heard of it, Andrew? It's a show.
Where can I find it?
Idiots who drive a car off a cliff. They
wait, no.
No, there was a moment where we got to Neverwinter, and I as the the omniscient dungeon master that I am, totally forgot that Neverwinter was where one of the characters was from. And, like there was a moment where Goovy was like, "Hey, I want to go talk to this like old place I like worked at. I want to go talk to the Lord's Alliance," and like just. I did not have that. I did not have that part planned.
Yeah.
But like because Goovy called it out, and because there was the moment of like give and take, and like, oh cool, I didn't have this plan. But let's trust each other and let's work together and let's tell the story together. It turned into like one of the more driving parts of the story and one of the more memorable parts of the story in my mind.
Yeah, it became one of like my favorite character interactions and subplots that ended up happening with Corvair and everything. And like that's one of my favorite parts of, I guess, like the topic here, like role play affecting narrative, is like when you can make a choice that you don't actually like know how it's going to end up or anything, and then like your DM can play off of that. Similarly, the whole gambit of Quest for Atlantis is we're trying to find Atlantis. My character was a sailor in his past, and so when we get the hook and it's like, you must find Atlantis, my character is like, that's a myth. Like every sailor knows that myth. And it created this tension point that like I wasn't expecting it to like make the guy that's giving us the quest like frustrated with us and ask us to leave. I was just like, you know, my character would probably not believe that that's a thing. And then it added tension, and Dave played off of it beautifully. And so like those kind of character choices off your soft background can really affect how the story plays out, even if it's not going to derail and like ultimately change it. It changes. It's like a spice, changes the flavor of the dish, the stew, really.
Stew.
Oh man, like the stuff that we were saying, kind of that's what jogged my memory when I kind of lost my train of thought there a little bit back, which is I think people sometimes, I did this several times. I came with a character that I wanted to be cemented, and I was like, this person's static. Like they are already everything I want them to be. I don't see any growth happening. Like I wasn't saying those words explicitly, but I wasn't looking for growth opportunities. I was looking for opportunities to show off this character I'd built and been like, ooh, these interesting RP moments where I can reveal my backstory in a very dramatic way. Whereas I think, like Christian mentioned, front story, and like Goovy is like mentioning these backstories that don't need to like, don't make them super specific, because these characters, like we're starting at level 1 and we want to see these characters grow. That's what makes us fall in love and get endearing to like these characters, because we see where they've come from and we see the struggles they've went through. So when I think about character and art role playing, I think sometimes when there's too much work done on behind the scenes, we have this subconscious expectation to be rewarded for that work by showing it off in these like role-playing moments versus struggling with this character and then having them triumph and seeing the whole arc in the recording itself. So
which is a much
journey
more
before destination.
to me, that's a much bigger payoff. Like you were saying, like you want to be rewarded by showing off the character, but like how much bigger of a reward is it when you get to go through the struggle too? And like, you know, you have those tearjerker moments or those moments where like you physically are enraged or something, or like those spine chilling moments because your character is afraid of what's happening and you're actually afraid too. Those are bigger payoffs.
Something that happens in line with that too is like when you're role playing, you'll naturally inject parts of yourself into your character, and it's been like shown that D&D can have a lot of therapeutic elements because it allows you to sort of like in a third person way view problems and solve problems that you know you might be dealing with, but you're like seeing it through the eyes of playing this character, so it's not necessarily as threatening or feeling or something. So also the benefit we're role playing and like having your character go through struggle and not just already be this perfect thing, you know, like Andy talked about how this is what endears us to our characters is when we see them grow and we get to have those cathartic moments that feel real to us because we're going through them. And, you know, oftentimes it might be a reflection of something that's going on in your own life or something that, you know, you've struggled with in the past. And it allows you that opportunity to not just grow the character and feel closer to them, but maybe like find some like solutions for your own problems and stuff.
I love
Isn't
that.
that crazy how like if you just sort of semi-remove yourself from a situation, you can still act out a situation and not have it feel like it's part of who you are. I don't know if that made any sense, but I was just thinking, like D&D, or like I'm struggling with X, Y, and Z. I'm going to act out these exact things, but with a funny voice, and I'm less afraid to do it. Like, I don't know.
David, that doesn't make a character though. Funny voices.
It doesn't actually. Right, can you repeat that thing I said earlier?
Dave, are you saying that me doing a third person story about struggling with realizing you're not as strong as you thought might be a third person view of my own struggles? Hold on.
Interesting.
Hold on.
Let's soak that in.
And you're telling me that struggling with two buttholes is something that I may actually be struggling with in real life? Jesus, David.
I need to see a doctor for that one or a cleric in the game.
That's an important RP element in our show.
So yeah, I do want to say one thing serious.
Yeah, Greg, can you cut that out? That's a big spoiler.
You're struggling
Big spoiler. Big butthole spoiler.
One of the hardest and fastest ways, scientists have proven this, one of the best ways to get into character is pretend you have two buttholes.
Well, I'm ahead of the game.
You realize that none of this is getting cut out, right?
You build your character from an anatomical level up,
right?
And that's really how you get to know them.
Starting from the gluteus meatus.
Ooh, I think some of the most unfortunate bits that have become canon in our show is physical things about areas.
Oh man, yeah. What I like about it's like we're never gonna like have a doctor give an exam of areas, so it's just kind of fun joking about it because I'm never like there's never gonna be a physical. All right, you know what? I brought this up. I shouldn't have brought this up.
Next episode.
You should have a physical done, Andy. You should definitely have doctors do your physical at some point.
Instead of a shopping episode, there's a physical episode.
All right, and now just breathe for me, deep breath,
cough,
and out,
cough.
I feel like the
Turn right.
like exclamation point on your character's story is you're going to be like, we're going to have succeeded in whatever. The world is reset, and Arius is going to be sitting there getting his prostate examined.
And find out it wasn't actually a second butthole; it was just a bullet wound.
I imagine it's more he's sitting on a rocking chair on a porch at a nursing home, drinking a cup of tea.
That is a very pleasant way to imagine.
I hate where my brain is going on this thought train right now.
Nikki, you can have full creative liberty to just cut any and all of this out if you totally wish.
I don't edit this episode.
Oh no!
Save us, Greg.
That I'm also looking at the Twitter. We did get some responses. I don't know, Nikki, if that's where you were going with this. I know sometimes we can totally steamroll and absolutely just take the reins.
I do have some questions. Yes.
Okay.
By all means, maybe let's hop to those to get away from the dual butthole action.
Yeah.
The dual butthole action, cocked and loaded.
The double barrel butthole.
All right.
And here we go.
Off of that note,
Greg, please cut some of that out.
I do want to see how you're going to transition this because your first transition was glorious. Let's see. What we
now I'm have too much pressure.
No. Sorry, I was talking to one of my roommates. He's doing something totally different. I wasn't talking to you at all, Nikki.
Mhm.
Diamond-studded, gold-plated, big wheel Segway. Let's go.
I'm broken. So not speaking about buttholes whatsoever.
Great.
The best kind of segue.
How Cheryl from Nature Check asked in in our Discord channel, how can players help build the setting through roleplay?
They can't. Done. Next question.
Yeah.
All
Next
right,
question.
easiest-
Moving
easiest-
on.
Cheryl, how about you ask a better question next time?
Oh no.
I'm sorry,
I mean,
David. I don't know. It'd be like, oh.
Andy.
I mean,
I was gonna. Give me just go.
I think a lot of really cool ways is like, I think one of my favorite things is Arius and Andy. Like, you built out your backstory to be that your character's from so far east, he's back west again. And like, he comes from this chain of islands of hobgoblins and things. And then like, we eventually get to an island that like seemed familiar or like was kind of that direction and everything. And we were like, oh shit, like maybe we might see some people like that. And then like Kippa's character comes from the Fae, and we started seeing characters from the Fae and things that tied into him. And like, you know, just making a hard choice about, I'm from here. And then like that comes up, or like you can impact the world around you just because you are from there. Or like how Dave was saying, like, I was from Neverwinter and it changed what Neverwinter looked like for us. Now there was a Lord's Alliance headquarters and NPCs that weren't there before. And your character choices and what you choose to be 100% impacts that environment.
Yeah, especially if you have a DM that is like eager for that collaboration. Because I know, like, you know, we've talked a lot about our style, but like when I'm planning out a city or something, or writing a story for, like currently I'm writing something that I'm going to run the boys through. And I reached a point where I just stop in developing like the stuff, because I'm like, all right, I want to know who they are first. I want to know where I can inject them and put places that they might know. Maybe there is a tavern that they frequent. Maybe there's like an area that they would know better because they were raised in this area. Like all those elements that you choose about your character will help the DM like ingrain you into the world and give you more reasons for like being on this quest.
Absolutely.
And from a smaller perspective, if you're in a room, like flavor wise, you can also, I think it's fun to add little things. Like if you're in a dining room and the DM explains the dining room, this is very like in scene, you could say, oh, I grabbed the candelabra off the table. And as long as you're just using it for flavor purposes and not I'm stealing everything shiny to go make money, then I think that adds more flavor. Like they don't need to give you every grain of detail of the story. You can interject your own.
That's
Absolutely.
beautiful. I love that so much, because that's something that I love to try to do, is look for things that David hasn't described and then see what I can get away with.
Yeah. Well, I love this question too. I was gonna take a stab at it, like kind of what Nikki's saying, at like a more local level, more immediate area level, because I think there's a struggle around a TTRPG experience, because I think there's a belief that if it hasn't been said, it doesn't exist, or that isn't the case, because if that was, it'd be a very empty world. So I think there is a responsibility as well as like a power on the character side to be like, oh, I'm in a dining room. I'm gonna sit and I take a seat in a chair to like take the information that's being given to me by the NPC, like sitting down because it's so heavy. Or I think that the character can imply or create the world with the DM. I mean, if the DM is willing, which if they aren't willing, then maybe there's another question. But I think because if it hasn't been said, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So I think that's something that hangs people up or gets kind of like a block for role playing, is I have to interact with the things that have only been talked about in this conversation. So that limits your opportunities. But I think you can bring in something that hasn't been specifically stated. I
have two points on that. That was one of my tricks back when we were doing improv. If you ever felt like you were stuck or didn't know what to do in a scene, like if you just sit down for like 1 second and you're like, cool, I'm in a car wash. What would be in a car wash? How can I interact, like physically interact with like the squeegees or the soaps or like whatever? Like it sounds kind of silly, but like that's one of the simplest ways to like really kind of ground yourself in a scene.
Mhm.
And like speaking of role playing, like a lot of times, yeah, I'll do that too. Like even on the show is like the guys are talking like, we're in the captain's quarters of the ship. Like, okay, what's here? Okay, it's all these maps. What could the maps do, or how could the maps help move this story forward? And I think that's just like another little tip and trick about like if you're struggling with role playing, just like sit down for a second and take a breath and like just imagine what the setting could look like, and then trusting your other players and your DM to like, if you call those things out, that they're going to know how to react with that, how to respond to that. Because I think that's a big part. And then the second thing, to quote a very, very wise woman, people, oh Andy, I hate this. People care about what they help create, and then they're responsible when they care. So if you're if you're a DM or a player, or if I guess this would be more specifically towards DMs, if you build in those moments or allow your players to like interact with an object that you didn't respond or didn't describe, or like add in a whole section to a city you weren't ready for, or like add their own weight and their own creativity to your world, like they're going to be so much more invested in your game and in the setting and in the story. And then that only makes everyone's job easier. If people are like invested and care in the story and care about their characters and care about the world, like then you're playing D&D. Like
that's a great point and a great Karen Tilstra reference.
Now this is pod racing.
This
literally this is podcasting. Well, I think you're kind of scratching on the biggest, deepest root experience of role playing, which is all about trusting and having permission to create with other people in the same environment, right? Because that's really what it comes down to when it comes to role playing. It's like if someone doesn't want to role play, they either haven't given themselves permission, or they don't feel like they've been given permission, and they're afraid they might offend someone or diverge the story somewhere it shouldn't be. Whereas if you're in a position where you feel completely able and like you have the responsibility and the permission given to you, then people would role play at incredible levels. I think there's just blocks that are placed on the individual by themselves, and then also by maybe sometimes even their DM or players, and that's what I think at the very base of it, role playing is all about trusting and enjoying this flex and flow of creative responsibility between everyone at the table. So if you're I think if someone's in a position where they are struggling with that, like maybe there's like a deeper interpersonal reason.
Yeah.
And
well, I was going to say that kind of brings it back to the first question that we started this all with, where it's like, it really is. If you're a first-time player, the most important thing that you can have at the table is trust with the people that you're playing with. Because if they're people that you're comfortable with, if they're people that, you still need to build a relationship with, give it time. And once you build that trust and have that trust, then you'll find that it's a lot easier to role play and to, like Andy said, you have the permission. You feel like those blocks and those walls are down, and you feel free to just let what happens happen, because that's when the magic of role play really starts happening.
Absolutely.
You free it up.
And Christian, I think the first question we actually asked was, who is Giark?
Right. No, and that is
tying back to
that is answering that. Tying back to
Giark to be there.
Just Giark.
But no,
I'll be there.
I love that you said that word, Andy. Just to have the trust in yourself, in your players, in your DM. I run a side game with some other people that are a bit newer to D&D, and like one of them messaged me on the side, and they're like, "I'm not having fun." And I was like, "Oh shit, like I'm a bad DM. I thought the game was interesting." I was like, "Oh, like what's wrong?" He's like, "I just feel like I keep making like bad decisions for my character, and I never know what to say in the moment, and I don't think I'm doing him justice." And I was like, "Oh, just take a step back. Like, there's no wrong answer to what you're doing. Like, you shouldn't feel like I'm not making the right choice here for my character. If you like feel it, trust yourself to make the choices for your guy, because you're the only one that can.
Whatever choice you make is the right one.
Yeah, whatever choice you make is the right one.
Absolutely.
Like, you are not failing if you feel like you didn't make the right call. And like after we had that conversation, like he started to do a lot more like creative things versus just like I roll to attack. He'd be like, ooh, I like, because he's an Eric Cocker in that game. He's like, can I like grab the MacGuffin with my feet and like fly up and take it away from? I'm like, hell yeah, you can, dude. Like, do it. Or he's like, can I pick up the barbarian and drop him onto the enemy? And I'm like, fuck yeah, like do it. And he like, once he realized like there's not a wrong choice and he just started to trust himself, he started making a lot more like creative and impactful to the narrative choices.
And I think that's beautiful for like to get back to Cheryl's question, how can players help create the setting and the story? Like that's it. Like just trust each other and trust yourself and just know that it is okay to create the setting. Like even if you're
and it's impossible to fail.
Yeah. Well,
right.
I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, it's impossible. Impossible to fail. Absolutely.
Well,
Sorry, David.
If you kill your party, that you might be failing in that point.
Says Nikki, huh?
Three
Yeah,
of
I bet
the
you experienced that.
I never killed
murderous
a
one.
party member.
You are really highly affecting the narrative and the environment.
Yeah.
Your party.
Very
It's not a
big one.
failure. It's just an opportunity to make a new party.
That's
Some people
fair.
just want to kill their own party.
Some people just want to see the world burn.
Look, guys, I just didn't like how you were role playing with me, and I made new characters for you.
Oh my
So
god!
now we can all play the game I want to play.
You will find
I
underneath
wanna-
your chairs
I wanna play with this
new
person.
character sheets of
No,
characters
but,
I've made for you.
On the topic of you can't fail, one thing that I always like to try and remind people, and sometimes myself, is like just because what you wanted to do didn't go how you wanted it to, doesn't mean you failed at what you did. It just like, you know, life is strange and equally so imaginary life. And so it's like one of my players one time tried to do this, like they made themselves with this illusions look like biblical angel, like, you know, multi-wings, multi-eyes and stuff. And they tried to intimidate a group of 4 humanoids they were walking up on. But the humanoids were mindless undead, and they felt really bent out. And they were like, oh man, like, should I even have specialized in intimidation? And I was like, yeah, dude, like it's worked for you in the past and it'll work for you again in the future. Just sometimes plans don't go how you want them to. And you didn't know that it was mindless undead you were walking up on. So yeah, it failed, but that doesn't mean you failed. Like you made a cool
You
choice.
can turn that into a character moment.
Yeah, it was a cool choice, a cool moment. It just didn't necessarily pan out how you wanted it to. But you didn't fail. It didn't go how you thought. And that's going to happen. I mean, as a DM, I think we all know that. It's not going to go how you think.
And I would like
Yeah, and you can role play out like your character feeling like they failed while knowing that you, like the player, the person, didn't actually fail. It's just an opportunity for something that unexpectedly happened to you to be turned into a role play element.
Yeah, and I would like to emphasize that if you technically fail on a dice roll, you can still role play that out really coolly.
Oh, that is my
That
favorite
I was
thing
about
to
to say,
do.
that's Christian's bread and butter is the
I
failure.
love getting that ones. I love it. But I'm a halfling, and only until recently I'd never used my luck feat because I just kept forgetting or not wanting to.
It's like I rolled a 1. Yes! You're halfway.
Yes.
But no, yes.
Yes, no, I
Yeah.
hurt me with the natural one.
I mean, failure is what moves the story forward, right? Success is the end point, but failure is like the middle.
Whoa,
So, like,
dang.
oh my
Yeah, you
God.
think about any story arc, movie, book, whatever, there's always going to be a deepest, darkest moment, like right around towards the end, 3/4 of the way through, so that they can have that glorious success. And like the success doesn't mean anything if you don't go through that dark period.
Yeah, success is payoff. It's not a normal thing.
I always
Failure is
succeed.
very normal.
I know what you're talking about. Totally,
Whoa.
always succeed.
Always out here blessing.
Not sarcastic
Yo,
at all.
Out here blessed.
Hashtag blessed, never stressed.
Hashtag
I got rest.
stress, never rest.
Will you
Yes.
be our guest?
Be our guest. Be our guest. Be our.
Put our service to
Dang, we even got Disney references in someone else's show. What is wrong with that?
The
we
Next
cannot
question.
run from the
Yes.
Disney reference.
Next question. What else you got for us,
This
Cheryl?
one is probably this. No, that was the last Cheryl question. The
Dang.
next one is
Oh,
from.
we missed Cheryl already.
Come back, Cheryl.
Well, you can go check her out on Nature Check.
On it.
Andrew from the First Watch.
Hi, Andrew.
He asked, were you kickstarted by COVID to have distance recording, or have you always done distant recording?
Well, as our name sort of spells out, we are from afar.
Yeah.
And the name
Yeah,
literally
it was like a twofold name.
Yeah, the name came from we had all moved to different parts of the US and we wanted to stay in touch, so we made this game that we're playing from afar. So for us, I wouldn't say it changed anything because we've always played from afar.
That's fair.
Yeah, we were very
You were
lucky in that sense because
Yeah.
there were a lot of our friends who are in the podcasting space that we've met through this, and like the ones that recorded in person all of a sudden have to like figure out new ways of playing and get used to it. Because I mean, that's something you don't realize too when you go to start it. Like you have to like go through this period, this awkwardness of like getting used to being on recording and being distance and like timing your replies with each other so that you're not accidentally, the lag isn't like getting in the way of the story and stuff. But so we were definitely like lucky enough that we were already well versed and like used to recording long distance. So yeah, it was very lucky in that sense that it didn't impede us.
Yeah, I know that I played a lot in person. I did have online games already because I play with people from like England, or I play with people from like the Pacific Coast and stuff like that.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
And so it wasn't, for me, it wasn't a big jump. It was just like, oh darn, I don't get to see my best friend and my friends anymore in person.
Right. Yeah.
But for my friends, they always played in person. They very rarely played online. So they're like, oh, I hate this. Like, this is so different. There's no map I can just draw out. I can't see your facial expressions. And like all of those have workarounds. It just takes a little bit more effort.
Yeah.
So it's still doable.
Very much so.
And I gotta say, I'm very thankful that we've reached a point where D&D is so doable online and on computer. Because I mean, when 5th edition first came out and we didn't have D&D Beyond and Roll20 and, you know, like Zoom and Discord, or we had Discord, but I wasn't as used to it. But like, you know, now it's a much easier space to be able to do it long distance in the 5-6 years that 5th edition's been out. I don't know how long it's been out.
It's been that long already. Jeez.
Wow.
I'm very, very like thankful that we're in a space that during COVID, you know, people can keep their games going, even though it's a jump and it's a difference. Because I mean, in the old days of D&D, if this happened, like, it sucks to suck because there was no online anything.
So fun fact, because I just Googled it, Roll20 did exist before 5th edition.
Did it?
2 years.
Oh, interesting.
2012 and 2014.
Dang.
I can't imagine early beta Roll20. Their UI is already so hard.
It probably wasn't good. It just existed.
Because I remember a little after I got into 5th edition, like Christian, back when we did like Butt Nipples the Stellar.
Yes.
I had discovered Roll20 and like I could not figure it out.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I still can't figure it out very well. Like, I know a little bit, but I'm still like, I'm just gonna use a Google Sheet.
There you go.
Like, I just use Google Sheets and make a map on there, and I'm like, you can see where you are. It's fine. It's so much easier.
I
So
reached a point where I used to have an in-person game, and then a couple people moved to Washington, and we would be on a Skype call sharing screens, and they'd have a map open and they'd slowly erase the black layer over it. And then we were like, we should probably learn how to use Roll20 because this is massive hoops we're leaping through to be able to see the map right now.
That's amazing.
Yeah, Roll20 does have a learning curve for sure. But
that dynamic lighting.
yes, dynamic lighting is really cool.
It is very
I'm trying
cool.
to learn Foundry right now.
Oh, dude, we had our first experience with Foundry recently, and it is phenomenal.
I saw.
Oh, is that the one with DM Zach?
Yeah, that's what I saw.
That's so cool.
Oh, Foundry is very, very cool.
Yeah,
I bought it, and the next day it went on sale.
Oh no!
Like,
this actually kills.
Here, I'm gonna mess
the man.
Like,
that's the Grandissimo Peña right there. Grandissimo Delore.
The lore.
So the next question I have I have a couple of questions from Dungeon Meowster.
Ooh, hi, Dungeon.
Meowster.
What's up, Meowster?
Meowster. Sorry.
They ask, how can DMs frame things so especially new players want to RP?
Again, they can't. Moving on.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
I'm
David,
done.
I'm so glad you're here.
David
Jeez.
here to just give the hard answers.
The hard answers that we're too scared to say. Honestly, David's been known for that as the true, honest. Like he'll just say it to you straight.
David's such a hard ass.
He's never gonna be nice to you in order to help you out.
Oh, I'm trying to think like how you can make it
Well,
easier for people to role play.
Well,
I feel like David answered this beautifully earlier with the no. No, I'm just kidding. With the with the
Why are we still talking about
the
you guys?
if they create something that they'll feel the like responsibility and care for it.
Mhm.
I think a good stepping stone is the phrase that we all hear, especially if you're a critical role friend. How do you want to do this?
Mhm.
Like that's giving the players a stepping stone to like encourage them. Like, hey, tell me what you're doing. Like, show me what you're doing.
Yeah.
Explain how this is happening. And even if you do that with fight scenes, like, okay, you run up and punch them. Tell me what you do. Where do you hit? What happens? And it's nice to have that little bit of encouragement, especially if they're like they're a newer player. Or when I help players create, not necessarily for role play, but create characters, I go, what are you imagining, especially when they're new? Like, what do you think? Like, what do you want to play? Pretend you have no idea, like you don't have any idea of what character exists already.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So based off your knowledge of what shows you've seen, movies you've watched, video games you've played, books you've read, what kind of character is calling out to you? I bet we can make it work.
Mhm.
What is it?
That's a great way to approach it. Like getting them to just identify with something that they already enjoy and then saying like, how can we work this into the D&D setting? Because at this point with 5th edition too, you could pretty much do anything or make anything.
Yeah, especially with Tasha's Cauldron.
Yeah.
Which
And
literally
all
like
the-
lets you break all the rules now, and I love it.
Well, like even that too, like there's so many great people out there making supplements on their own.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely.
Like our friends Underground Oracle, like they make stuff all the time with like races and things that you would never even have thought of, which is like such a great part of how D&D has come into the limelight more. Like whatever you want to do or whatever you're imagining, it can probably be done.
Yeah. I think when I what I did a few times, because I DM'd for some very new players that are like, that was almost a year ago.
Wow.
And I think
Were you about to say the other day?
I was like, oh my
I do that
god,
all the time.
COVID just feels like the longest week of my life.
Yeah.
But I think it's one thing I did is I would have a few like intro scenes where I basically would just ask them like what it looked like. So I'd be like, oh, and we see where you are from and where are you from? And I kind of like ask these questions to kind of pull the story out of them, and like, which kind of shows them that they can like have the creative freedom over it. And like, I am willing to like pass the ball to them, because as a DM, you lay the structure, but then the players flesh it out. So that's one way I've done it. I don't know if that's the best way to do it. I haven't DM'd in a while, but that was one way. I think it worked really well. They had a fun time, a lot of laughs.
Well, I think that's exactly what it is. It's I think as a DM, a couple things you can do is like you're saying, like just ask your characters questions. Like it's just gonna be as simple as like, what are you doing? Like getting to a new setting and just being like, well, what do you want to do? Like, what would your character want to do in this situation? Like giving them that opportunity to really just run wild with their imaginations, I think is really awesome and very helpful for your characters. And I think like on the like behind the scenes side of that, one thing that I would suggest to DMs is totally be willing to throw away your notes or just
100%.
Because one thing that I learned a while back from a book I read called The Lazy DM, because I felt that was very perfect for me, is you should learn to as a DM, you should learn to design your notes in such a way that you kind of build yourself outs where like never, like not never, but like you're only shooting yourself in the foot if you're like, this is the plot hook and it can only be said by this person in this setting with this exact set of circumstances, because that's never going to happen. Like
it's never going to go how you expect it to go once you start
so like
bringing characters into it.
So like one thing I would suggest is to DMs is like design in your prep and in your notes ways where you can be like, cool, this is the secret or the point I want to get across, but it's not tied to anything in particular. I just know that this is at some point in this session or in the next couple sessions, I want the characters to learn this bit of information. And it could be by this goblin in the bar, or it could be by the king, or it could be by this dragon, or they could just find like a note on the ground that like leads them into this next part of the story. I think like not pigeonholing your players into your own story. Like definitely you need to have your own voice into the story, and you prep for a reason, but you also need to design yourself these outs to like, well, cool. They killed the guy I wanted them to talk to. Dang, what do I do now? Like if you design yourself if you don't tie your secrets and your information to specific places and people, you will never have that situation of like, I'm not ready for this. Like, so yeah, that's it.
So I told, I said this story before on here, but it's relevant right now. There was a scene where I brought in a T-Rex to fight my party. And I was like, sweet, we're going to have an awesome T-Rex fight.
Mm-hmm.
Nope. No, somebody friended the T-Rex. And of course, the T-Rex rolled real bad and failed that save.
Mm-hmm.
And then they cast Awaken on the T-Rex.
Oh, no.
Oh,
no.
Because now it's their friend for 24 hours, so it's not going to eat them. So
Mm-hmm.
it politely asked them. Of course, T-Rexes evidently spoke Draconic. And I'm just like, God damn it. So I was like, sure, you can awaken the T-Rex, but it's not fucking fighting with you.
Yeah. It's your homie, but it is not your homie to go kill things with.
It's not your
I'm like, you have enough shit already in your party. No more.
Tying back to the question, I think another really good way to like get your players to feel more comfortable with role playing and stuff, and it's something that it took us a little while to learn, but Zipper on Disney on YouTube and Twitter. That's his name.
No, it is.
I know. I just, for some reason, when you say that, it triggers a
But he made this really cool video about like how to make your combat flow, feel easier and quicker and not so like quagmired. But one of his key things was when you as the DM, like in combat, it's like, okay, the orc just attacked whatever player, next player is up. And it's like, the orc stands over your friend, the axe coming down. And instead of saying, what do you do? Say, what are you doing? And like, it kind of makes the brain just think like, as opposed to like, what are my options? It's like, oh, fuck, what am I doing? It creates the term he uses is exigency. But like that moment where it's like, I need to act and like, these things are happening right now. What am I doing versus what do I want to do? And I think that's a good way to help, like, especially newer players, like, this is what's happening. What are you doing? Versus like, what do you want to do? And they're like, oh, I don't really know what I can do. But it's like, oh, my friend's getting attacked. What am I doing? I'm going to move and stop him. And then it's like, okay, how?
Then you get responses from them that are just more natural. It's like, oh, I want to help him. It's like, great.
Yeah.
Now we
and
can
then
figure
you
out
can
how
kind of
you
have
can
that
do
back
that.
and forth of like, so you want to help him. How? Do you want to attack? Do you want to like move and grab the guy? And it's like, oh, I want to grab the guy. And so that helps a player that doesn't know like, oh, grapple is an option to get to that point and learn that like the mechanics and things in a more natural way.
I want to flirt with him and I want to convince him to give up fighting to marry me. They're like, what? Nope, that's what I'm doing.
Hey, or that.
You flash a wink as you bring your sword into his gut.
Yeah, exactly. This is foreplay. So Dungeon Master's next question: these are both the next two questions are kind of related to DM stuff too, but how to drop pieces of overarching political scenes happening behind the scenes without being too obscure or making the world evolve around the players.
Ooh, I think Dave did a good job of this in one of our earlier episodes. He had like us just encounter like the emissaries from the Underdark that were like going through the city. There was like an uproar because the people were protesting and stuff like that. So we got to like get a hint. We still don't really know what was happening or what that might entail, but it's those little like crumbs that you leave behind, that you leave behind that like later on your players can be like, oh,
So hungry for crumbs.
tasty. I remember that.
I think another thing Dave did great was oh God, I can't think of the word right now. The things that happened after the session ended. What is that called? Epilogue. That word escaped me.
Epilogue.
But Dave will do sometimes at the end of our sessions or arcs or something. It'll be like, that's where the session ends. And it's like, oh, cool. And he goes, all right, now the camera goes here and like you see these things happening. And it's like, who says you can't do that? We don't have to only do it here, like where the players are. And we see a couple of things happen that we don't know what the answer is, but we're getting these little crumbs of things happening outside of the player's purview.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well-
there's actually in the show Tales from 2000 by GM Table, they role play it more like a movie scene, and they'll sometimes say like Bobby will sometimes say, and we pan out to something the players don't see,
Mm-hmm.
and he'll describe something so the characters know it, and the players have to know not to meta that stuff, and they do very well with it in the show specifically. But I know that some players will be they'll be like, oh well, we saw that, I looked behind my shoulder. I'm like, no, you've already walked away. That's fun to like show that side of the story too, I think.
Oh,
Well-
that I think is a huge tip to all tables, is like treat it like you are kind of watching a show, and like there is a camera, and like Dave's allowed us to even like as the players be like, the camera kind of pulls here and like you're seeing this specific thing about my character in this moment. And like I think it just allows everybody to kind of be a little more on board with the scene unfolding when you kind of allow there to be those camera directions.
It helps a
Yeah.
little bit with like imagination too. That kind of that freedom within those parameters, knowing that like, okay, this scene is done now and we're moving on.
I think with
So true.
with that, one of the things that has inspired me is this author
Oh no.
named Brandon Sanderson.
Oh.
Is he a breakfast cereal?
Raisin Bran
Ah.
Sanderson. If you
I am a
haven't,
fan.
good. One of the things I think he does incredibly well, and I think this goes to this question here, is he splits up his books into like sections, and in between those sections he has these things called interludes. Or interludes, right? Yeah, where it's literally just other characters in the world just existing, that they have really nothing, they're just not really tied to the main story, but it just gives you a moment to see that the world that Brandon Sanderson has made is more than just the four main characters. It's a living, breathing, existing world, and things are changing and happening without our perspective. And I think that's one thing like to think of as DMs when it comes to like the political movements and just worlds in general, is like you got to remember that your worlds aren't stagnant when you're not looking at them. Like
Mhm.
if you leave, like for example, at one point the three boys here, they killed someone in Neverwinter and then they left. And when they came back, it wasn't just like, oh cool, nothing happened. Like there was like wanted posters for them, and like
Mhm.
the guards were on high alert, and like things had changed and things had moved because of what they had done. And then
He had it coming though. I mean, let's be serious here.
and we had to kill him.
Let's be real.
He was racist.
Um,
Get them
Did
fuck
we
outta
have
here.
to beat up guards on our escape? Maybe not, but
Steal from those
Maybe.
old beggars? No. Did we have to kick those children as we ran away? No. But that was no. I'm not going to finish that joke.
Oh,
So there was actually a scene in my Friday game with my little monk that likes to punch things.
Okay, good.
The party kept giving money to this one cart lady who made sweet bread. So
Sweet
she's like, here's these breakfast desserts, and we loved them, so we would always go buy them, and we basically just kept buying her out and giving her like 20 gold or whatever. Like, here's 20 gold, we'll take everything you have. And we eat the sweet cakes all morning, and then we never finished them, but we just bought her out. So because of this, we gave so much money to her, she was able to afford to buy her own house.
Aw.
But that
That's cute.
meant that she became a target because she lived in like this poorer neighborhood, and someone tried to go after her and said, if you don't give us all your money,
No.
because we know you have money, something bad's going to happen. And it was right after they had just given the money to the bank to buy a house, so they didn't have the money anymore. And because of those actions, like bad things happened. Her grandson ended up getting killed in the process.
Whoa.
Right, it was extreme. But when we
You guys
found
re-
out,
You guys really.
Wow.
Oof.
yeah,
Pull
when
no
we
punches.
found out, because the sweet bread lady or sweet cake lady, she disappeared, And we're like, well, where's the sweet cake lady? And we went to search for her because we're like, something's wrong. She can't just not be there. And we slowly found out like what was happening. And we found out that her grandson had gotten killed, and we went on a hunt and found who killed him and destroyed the living shit out of them.
Oh,
We're
yeah.
like, how
yeah.
dare you, one, kill a child, but kill the sweet cake lady's grandchild? That's ridiculous. Do you know how sweet her cakes
Yeah.
are?
Well, I have a question. How
sweet cakes.
how memorable was that, Nikki?
How much what?
How memorable was that whole encounter?
I'm still talking about it. It's been like 5 months.
So that's something that I think goes back to like kind of this whole thing we've been talking about is like those moments. Like your DM probably wasn't like, cool, I'm gonna make this really crazy, awesome, evolving, living, breathing story involving the sweet cake lady.
Nope.
But, like, because you guys did that, because you all interacted with that, it
Mhm.
made it a story for your party. And like then there was like once the sweet cake lady got hurt, you were like, oh no, let's fucking move. Like
And, and what's funny is she's now a pivotal part of our story because we've taken in like children to help them, and she's like their adopted grandmother.
that's so
like we still see
Ugh.
that character all the time and go to her for help, and like even for silly things like, hey, we just want dinner, can we pick up some things? Like we add that to the story, and it just adds that little oomph to the story for us.
Yeah. I feel like
the role
yeah.
is like you guys took those chances, and you all together made this sweet cake lady a pivotal part of your story. And like that's, I feel like, a perfect, beautiful example of like this whole thing we've been talking about is like if you're willing to dive into it and let go and like trust yourself and trust your table members, you can have those cool moments that nobody was expecting, and that feels organic and feels powerful and memorable. And like I was getting emotional just listening to you talk about that. I'm like, the sweet cake lady. Like you can,
How could you?
Yeah, you
Her
hear
name is Mildred, by the way. We didn't know that till all those things happened, and then we're just like, we went and found another sweet cake person. We're like, where's that one sweet cake lady? Also, what is her name? We've been buying food from her for 2 months and we don't know.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
I feel like that just it's perfect. It's perfect.
So
I feel like too, like the foundations of story, like sure they can happen like behind the scenes when you write it, but really like the story that the characters and the players care about happens at the table in those moments of role play that cannot be pre-written. Like I don't think your DM, or if you were the DM, Nikki, like knew that was going to happen. I wouldn't have. That
No.
these people were going to create this relationship with this random person that probably was a joke, and then this is going to send them on this huge arc of like revenge, and then just like turn into this like integral core of the story. That wasn't pre-written. That was created in the moment, and I think that's that buy-in, that's that responsibility that you guys helped create, like David said.
Yeah.
And that's like you care so much about it.
I'm pretty sure she only existed because one morning someone's like, I want pastries or something.
Yeah,
what do
literally.
I see outside, and like that started all of it, and we're like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's so beautiful that can
So
be
cool.
made.
I love
like
that.
And
So-
quite literally, it's character choices and roleplay affecting the narrative and the environment. Boom.
Yes.
Mhm.
Boom.
Boom.
Huge.
Huge. Boom.
Huge. Greg, can you cut that part out?
Greg, you better not fucking cut that out.
Greg, if you cut that part out, I'm cutting you.
You listen here, Greg. That's good shit.
Now, Greg.
Greg
Listen here,
Anthony.
Gregory.
Gregamus.
Graximus. No.
Gregorian chanter.
Maybe we should go to the next question, Nikki. I'm sorry, I derailed it.
Bum, 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 bum,
So-
bum, bum.
Speaking of derailing, I guess.
bum.
So when it comes to traveling,
Mm.
how do
Oh.
you keep this? How do you keep it from not being too boring and just saying we're walking and we're walking and we're walking? Do you skip ahead on traveling, or do you actually add something to the story? I know that personally, like I'll sometimes just go, okay, you walk for about a week and then you have like an encounter and you walk about a week.
Mhm.
That way it goes a little bit faster, especially if it's like a 3-week journey. Nobody wants to role play for 8 sessions walking.
The way I do it personally is a little different than we do it on the show, but I think the way we do it on the show is normally like, I think it's pretty perfect as a player, because Dave
Wow.
will kind of be
Yeah.
like, all right, like we're hitting downtime. Is there anything you guys specifically want to do? And then like
Mhm.
we each
Well, we have a great
That's
bonus
true.
of
That's
traveling
very
on a
true.
ship
Yeah.
that has like a mall's worth
It
of
is.
Cyberpunk
things that we can do.
2077 in Faerun.
Mm-hmm.
But so then like we each get to have like little character moments and things like that we want to do on the downtime, or like go get new armor from the blacksmith or a new tattoo. And then like once we've all done what we want to do, or during that time, Dave will interject what might have happened or what's happening during or post travel. In my own games, I kind of hate random encounters because like, yeah, it's a dangerous world, but like also just throwing an HP pool at you seems kind of lame. So like I will just like put random people that they'll bump into during those travels just to like flesh out the world a little bit, and like whether they go to blows with that person or make an ally out of that person. That's kind of how I like to, in my own personal games I run, deal with travel. Is like you're probably going to come across people on this really long journey on main roads and things.
Mm-hmm.
So I have an idea that is a little different, that I have yet to do, but plan to incorporate into a game that I'm writing that I want to run these boys through. But specifically, like if you're wanting to have a narrative element attached to travel, what you could do is, and this could be controversial, but like take the agency away from the players on the road. And instead, what I'm going to try to do is have some poems written to describe these places that they're traveling through. So it can be more of like a cinematic narrative thing where they're getting the information, but they're getting it in a way that they might not expect, or that might just be different, but also allows you to inject like a really unique sort of like reason for doing that. Like the reason for doing it, like I have a reason for wanting to do poetry because of the overall theme and like idea behind the story, but there might be other ways that you could do that in a similar way, where you could create like little intro sequences where you have like each environment and you run down this like beautifully written out thing that you've written up beforehand. Yeah, there's plenty of ways to go about it, but just like trying to find ways that it could potentially just travel, have an impact on the
That's
story
awesome,
too.
I love that.
That could be a lot of fun.
We'll see.
I know
We'll see how
that
it goes.
I relied heavily on random encounter tables because when I first made my first homebrew type game, I was very new to it, and I was just like, okay, what do I want to do? And I felt like if I could prepare as much as possible, then I would be able to survive this attempt of homebrew. So I pre-made encounters, and I'm like, I would roll to see the difficulty, and then I would roll to see like the weather and stuff like that. And I had like a table for each thing, and they were on a pirate ship as well, or a ship, but they were pirates, and they were going on a task, and they were traveling for like 3 months by ship. So I was like, well, I don't want them to just be, you're sailing, you're still sailing, you're still sailing. I wanted it to be like something interesting happens. And I know that the encounters themselves weren't very interesting. Looking back at it now, the party had fun, which is what matters.
Oh, absolutely.
The one encounter that was amusing as fuck for me specifically was they found a treasure chest, and inside was a magical box of chocolates.
Ooh.
And I can't find the item anymore on the internet, but when you ate a piece of chocolate, you rolled a random die. There was I think it was a D12, and you would randomly get one of the effects from the box.
I love that.
I was
If,
like, somebody eat it, somebody eat it, somebody eat it.
If you find that, just send that over my way for reasons.
Oh, it's all right, Dave. If you give it to us, we won't use it for 30 episodes.
It's true. You won't.
Well, I finally convinced somebody to eat it, and something good happened. So then,
Aw.
of course,
that's
other
good.
people were like, "Oh, cool! Let me eat a piece of chocolate." Like it was like a buff bonus for like 3 days or something like that.
That's really cool.
So
Then one player ate it
Oh, nice.
and turned into a monkey
Yes.
for 2 weeks and couldn't go on to shore leave because they couldn't leave.
that's
And then,
amazing.
That's amazing.
but my favorite one was my husband was playing a water ganassi, and he was playing a female,
Mhm.
and he ate it, and the thing said you don't have to eat for 1d4 plus 1 days, but I added the thing, but you're hangry the entire time. So for 3 days, he was basically acting like me when I get hungry.
It's
And
amazing.
at the end of the 3 days, he's like, fuck it, I'm just gonna go eat, because now he can eat because he doesn't feel full. And he picked it, and he rolled, and he got the Wild Surge magic table one.
Oh no.
And I'm like, okay, baby, I need you to roll a D100.
Oh no!
And he teleported to the astral sea and died.
Oh no!
Oh no!
Oh
And it
no!
was amazing because the likelihood of that happening was so small.
That's delightful.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
I just loved it so much.
I'm
will
running.
say on that note though, because like I'm not a huge fan of random encounters, but it is a great way to reward your players. Like random encounter, and you found this magic item. I had done something similarly where I'm running a Descent into Avernus campaign, and I gave them a bag of beans, and the bag of beans do slightly different things, but if you plant them, they do that effect on like a minute delay. And they were trying to traverse the Avernian wastes, and they were like close to a group of a bunch of devil soldiers. And so they snuck up, buried a bunch close to them, and ran away. And then they ended up summoning 4 pyramids with mummy lords in them, like a bunch of shrieking humanoid, like man-sized mushrooms that just shriek at like this incredible volume. A statue of one of the players that looks just like them and claims that they're like the most nefarious villain and tells people where to find them to put them down. And like all these different things happened at once. And I was like, there you like, I'm glad that I gave you guys this bag of beans because they made hell worse.
Bag of beans.
The only time I've ever had the pleasure of using the Wild Magic Surge table has been like 4 times, and every time it's happened, it is always summoned a Modron, like a metal Mike Wazowski, and it just it's the only every time one of my Wild Magic Sorcerers rolls, it's literally always that goddamn Modron. And he's become a character now, actually.
Like, it's showing up to haunt you.
Like, I haven't seen you in a couple of years. I missed you.
Mike Wazowski.
I wouldn't have nothing if I didn't have you.
So the last question I have, I think we actually already answered, but Mike from Tales of Asperon asks, when it comes to playing the game, how much do your players contribute to the greater world building outside of the consequences of their own actions?
0.
I think we've already answered that.
Yeah, David gives us a lot of creative liberty because, this is kind of our bread and butter. We've known each other for so long that we can like fuck around and have these like funny moments. But I think we have a general same idea of the kind of story we want to tell. So even though we say some of these things, and even though it kind of bites in the butt, like we understand that we're here to tell a good story, and we agree that the other 3 boys have a good idea of what that could sound like. So we pass trust and we pass the liberty back and forth so much. And David is so giving as a DM to allow us to do that.
Thank you. That's pretty much what I was going to say too. Is just like everyone at your table. I feel like anyone who wants to play a TTRPG has some sort of creative bone in their body. And anytime you collaborate on something like that, it's always going to be better as a collaboration instead of just one person trying to railroad a story. So like, if you give your players the agency to create and then you reward them for that, it's always gonna be better. Like I forget why I was talking to Christian the other day, and it was just like, man, like everything you guys do, like no matter what you guys do, it always makes the story better. So like even if it's a little more work on my end, like okay, how do I tie this new thing into the overarching story? Like I'm more than happy to do that because it's something that we created instead of something that I created, and that's always more powerful and more enjoyable to me as a person at the table.
So it has been absolutely fantastic talking to you guys today. So let everybody know.
Wonderful talking to you.
Yes.
It's been so much fun.
So
you can talk to us whenever you want, Nikki. We love talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Then yes.
Here's my number.
Greg,
don't edit this out.
I'm really
Greg.
saying this for you, Greg.
407.
You want.
Call me anytime if you need to talk.
867-5309.
309.
Where can everybody find you guys?
Yes. Apparently that number.
Yes. 867-5309.
Yeah. Dial that, no area code. You will get us every time.
Yeah.
Now you can find us on Twitter at From Afar Podcast, and if you message them, I'll be answering because I run that. Yeah. But on Instagram, Christian runs the Instagram, which I think is the same handle, right?
That's not From Afar Podcast.
Yeah, at From Afar Podcast. You can also find us on our website, www.fromafarpodcast.com, and we're on all major podcasts.
You can also join our Discord. which I don't know. I think it's just from Afar
There's
Podcast.
Yeah, there's a link at our there's a pinned link at our Twitter homepage. So if you ever want to join the fun, get in there.
Yeah, we do game nights and hang out with people.
So come
stuff like
fap
that.
with us.
No,
There it
that can't be the thing.
Yes.
I just want to say this
That
out
can't
loud
be the thing.
in case anyone doesn't know. FAP, FAP is from Afar Podcast. We're not just being disgusting human beings.
It is an unfortunate acronym that we did not realize when picking our name, but we've
we would 100%.
No,
maybe I was
we had already settled on it.
I knew it was after. I knew at least maybe I was a different conversation. I knew it was FAP, but I just knew that people would just remember it more easily then. Which I
was stoked on it once we figured it out.
That's so funny. I swore we had a conversation about it. Because I always think about acronyms of names, and I'm like, I don't want to spell like dick or something.
And we spelled FAP.
We spelled FAP,
which is a little bit better, but
is it better?
It's a topic of conversation that we're having right now, and I think that is the source of stuff for us. Luckily, we're very positive, so it hasn't been negatively attuned.
So come hang out.
Go ahead.
I was like, just come hang out with us. Find us on From Afar Podcast pretty much everywhere. And Goofy, do you want to say the tagline one more time? I don't really want you to, but
come fap with us.
Ugh.
So you guys can find the details and everything in the description down below. You can also come hang out with me on Twitter at Beholder to No One, or on Facebook, though I'm not as active on Facebook, Beholder to No One. You can see us on beholdertone1.com and find us wherever podcasts can be found. And so this has been fantastic. So thanks so much for joining me, guys.
Thank you for
thanks so much, Nikki.
And thank you for dealing with
having us.
Absolutely snail slow responses on Twitter. So super appreciate it because this was a blast.
All right. Bye, guys.
All right. Thanks for stopping by.
Bye.